Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 9th of November 2023. Let's get straight to the military aid segment. There's a lot to go through, as you can see by the myriad tabs I have and tab groups. So we'll start with the EU. So the EU's Commissioner for Budget and Admin is sure that Hungary cannot block aid to Ukraine. So we've had this situation where Hungary has been throwing a spanner in the works consistently in terms of, well, Ukrainian accession to the EU, but also, and more prevalent to this section on military aid, funding to Ukraine. They are trying to have leverage with the fact that one of their banks is blacklisted, the OTP bank. Also, they have this issue with education in the Transcarpathian region of diasporas or sort of Hungarian, ethnic Hungarians with the new rules in terms of, you know, teaching the Ukrainian language and so on and so forth. So they are trying to get some of their political ends achieved with being very difficult in aid to Ukraine. Here we have the EU's commissioner saying we can find a solution that concerns only 26 member states. In the end, I'm convinced that we cannot be stopped. It's the idea that at some point somebody's got to capitulate. At the end of the day, Hungary have a vested interest in getting this stuff done so they can get money, right? So next to reports, Hungary will not be able to block the EU's decision to allocate 50 billion euros to Ukraine for the next 4 years. European Budget Commissioner Johannes Hahn has said. The European Commissioner said Budapest, quote, will not be able to blackmail the European Union to unfreeze the funding by taking advantage of the need for a unanimous vote on all issues within the EU. The official believes that Hungary, which often blocks EU decision-making, in turn has a vested interest in seeing that the EU budget is passed because, quote, Hungary is also interested in more money to protect its borders. So we'll have to see how this develops. Hungary is being particularly difficult and obviously has some connections to Russia and so kind of rationale behind that positioning. Right, a new contingent of Ukrainian soldiers has begun training on the use of the Hawk anti-aircraft missile system performed by the 74th Anti-Aircraft Artillery Regiment as part of the activities of the European Military Assistance Mission to Ukraine. Now, this is interesting because the Hawk is an old anti-aircraft missile system that I thought had been given to Ukraine over the course of the war by different nations. There's talk about a lot of these fairly obsolete now weapon systems being available around the world, and it could be a great stopgap for the Ukrainians. Is this to indicate this is the first time they're being trained on it, or is this just subsequent training since other crews are active around Ukraine using these? I don't know, but they have been given some more of these recently. I say some more because I presume they'd had some previously. We know Spain has given some. I can't remember the other nations that have given Hawk. It was touted that Taiwan was going to give a whole bunch of theirs, but then they seem to have kept hold of that and reneged on that. I'm not quite sure what happened. Anyway, to continue, the Ministry of Defense has prepared a draft of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense draft government decree that will allow government customers to buy civilian drones. This is trying to make it the procurement process for example, drones, an easier one to participate in. The press service of the ministry reports that the Cabinet of Ministers should consider and approve this resolution in the near future. This has been on the cards for some time. There's been complaints about the red tape involved in procurement, particularly for drones. Actually, drones are such an important component of this war that the MOD surely needs to find it as easy as possible to get hold of these drones. Now, they have been getting hold of huge numbers of drones. We've seen the United 24 Army of Drones initiative provide literally thousands of drones a week for Ukraine, but that I don't think is a case of the MOD itself buying them. That's like a separate thing operating at the side. This is the MOD being able to just go out and just buy drones from the private sector easily and frictionless. So the Ministry of Defense, quote, and military units will finally be able to buy civilian drones, which are classified as tactical level drones. We hear requests from the military and are doing everything to solve them, the ministry emphasized. So what has previously happened is that they basically appeal kind of semi-privately as units and do these fundraising. I mean, I've given to countless sort of drone fundraising initiatives from individual units here and there that you come across, and they want money for getting hold of a drone, but that's not sanctioned, if you like, by the MOD. That's them, going, right, we can't get them through you, we need to get them through social media effectively. So hopefully good news. Now, talking about drones, hundreds of drones were sent to the front as part of the Drone Army project. Among them, Army of Drones are well-known and secret models of drones. Minister of Digital Transformation Mikhailo Fedorov reports the occupiers will feel the power of innovation, Fedorov said. So I don't know what that refers to. There's often these kind of cryptic claims as to, what's going on here and there, but nonetheless, they could have some pretty funky drones being able to do some pretty funky things. We'll see. Anyway, Czech Republic has extended the training of the Ukrainian military until the end of 2024, according to Radio Prague International. Good news. Czech army has obviously been a big supporter, or the Czech government has been a big supporter of Ukraine in terms of equipment, but also, as you can see here, in terms of training as well. And they also do things like upscale older Soviet tanks, upgrade them, refurbish them and whatnot. Sticking on, actually this should have been earlier in my drone bits, so sorry, wrong way around. One of the latest additions to the Ukrainian arsenal. Now this was talked about, I reported this over the last couple of days, that they had a Shahed equivalent capable of flying up to 1,000 kilometers with a payload of 15 kilograms. Not a payload of 15 kilometers, that's weird. Resistant to Russian electronic warfare, and that there is your key. So this gives you some details about it. Technical characteristics, this is Google translated, of the drone: allowed to fly to Moscow without much difficulty to carry out combat missions. It can bypass Russia's air defense system and almost invulnerable to radio electronic interference. According to the manufacturer, Hunter Killer is a low noise aircraft designed for multiple implementations of assigned tasks. It is equipped with a transport and launch device. The drone is controlled remotely using a special ground station by a human operator from a stationary or mobile control panel. Management is possible in autonomous, semi-autonomous and manual modes. So it seems to be fairly capable across the different kind of areas of drone operation there. Despite all the investment made in replenishing stockpiles, so this is moving on to UK, because I'm going to then move on to Germany actually. I said some things recently where people like stop slagging off the UK and stop saying like the EU is so great or Germany's doing so well. I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's like, as I've said, UK were brilliant, but they've stalled a bit, as according to the very Prime Minister who was responsible for that. So Boris Johnson last month came out and said, what the hell are we waiting for? We seem to have stalled. The question is, why have we stalled? And then Germany seems to have gone nuts for everything apart from tourists. So criticisms are due over not providing tourists. However, they're doing an awful lot of other stuff when at the beginning of the war they're only providing 5,000 helmets. So, okay. Basically, credit where credit's due. Now, Shashank Joshi here says, despite all the investment made in replenishing stockpiles over the past 6 months, $3 billion in July, almost every British official familiar with munition stockpile levels acknowledges privately that the situation is very bad. So when we're talking about, well, why has the UK stalled? It's pretty much stalled because we've got nothing left in the cupboard. And actually, this is a challenge not just for the UK, but for all NATO armed forces. And there's an absolutely brilliant Ukraine the Latest podcast done by Daily Telegraph, an extra one they did, like a bonus one, where they interviewed, I think, a retired army official who is now associated with the ISW, but it was absolutely brilliant interview. And also some recent ones I've seen with regard to Ben Hodges. Someone linked one that he spoke in Switzerland at the Swiss Institute for something or other. And that was a really good conversation. Both people touched on the idea that the wake-up call for the US, and by extension NATO, is how ill-prepared we are as nations if war was to happen like next week. So if the UK suddenly had to go to war, we'd be screwed. we'll be screwed because we've underfunded the armed forces for an awful long time. We don't have enough kit and we don't have enough stockpiles. And so when we've given to Ukraine, because we know it's in our best interest to do so, we've given everything we kind of possibly can, but the cupboards are bare, and that does not leave us in a good position. So this is about the military-industrial complex working together with governments to make sure that everyone is prepared for the worst-case scenario. The question is often, what is the Ukraine war teaching us? And this is one of the things that we can take from it, is we're not particularly well prepared, internationally. Now, the US, because of its massive budgets and huge stockpiles, even though they have been going into stockpiles, in a better position than the UK, but even for them, there are complaints that their stockpiles have been run dry. Well, not run dry, have been eaten into over the last sort of 20 years since Iraq, I guess. 20 or so years without being properly replaced. And actually what this war is allowing the US to do is ramp up production and replace aging equipment with new equipment, and sending that aging equipment to Ukraine. But they have massive amounts of equipment. I mean, the budget for the US Army is just obscene, right? So, or the Department of Defense. So when you look at the UK, relatively very small army, although we spend a lot of money when you compare it to other nations around the world. But what do we get for our money? I think we're not very good at procuring stuff, and we waste an awful lot of money on projects. You take like the drone projects that we've been working on for like the best part of a decade, which is producing these massive Reaper-style drone. It's like, that's not where drones have moved now. So we're behind the curve, and it's like, now that's the sunk cost fallacy. Well, what do you do with all that money we just spanked for nothing? So we're pretty good at spending money and not getting an awful lot in return. Actually, we also need to be spending a lot of money on ramping up production so that we are prepared in the event of a war. And Ukraine has shown us that basically we're not. As Jonathan Beale says here, when asked what keeps British defence chiefs up at night, both head of Royal Air Force, Royal Army say readiness, and when pressed, weapons stockpiles. There you go. Now, to go to Germany, so Germany will have this realization as well, but they seem to be, like Rheinmetall seems to be right at the center of the Ukraine war in a way that BAE Systems, you could see looking at Rheinmetall, so BAE Systems being a British defense manufacturer that is also very active in America, has a US arm as well, and so on and so forth. I think it's looked at Rheinmetall and gone, oh, they're setting up in Ukraine, are they? Oh, we need to go and set up in Ukraine, and kind of following along, trying to keep up. But in order to keep up, they need contracts to do that. And I don't know that the UK has been throwing out contracts, whereas, and this is particularly true with ammunition. I think BAE Systems was one of the last to be given like the order to actually make ammunition artillery from the UK government compared to other nations. Here Rheinmetall has received a 3-digit million order from the German government to provide Ukraine with 100,000 pieces of 120mm mortar rounds. So Rheinmetall is going, thank you very much. We are really in the middle of this war, very much, and Germany are on board with that, and that will in turn aid Germany. It's this kind of positive sum game. It's like the more that we're asking our defense industrial military complex to ramp up and do stuff for Ukraine, the more they're capable of doing stuff in the short term for Germany if needs be, right? Whereas, is that happening with Britain? So again, I'm not trying to slag off Britain. Britain's done an amazing job. I'm saying what British military chiefs are saying. We're not in a good place. The cupboards are bare, and that's arguably why we have stalled. And then when you look at actually what Germany has given to Ukraine now, the list is absolutely incredible in my books here. So 18 Leopard 2A6 tanks, so that's on the record more than the UK. 10 Leopard 105s with another 110 to be delivered. 28 M55S tanks were from Slovenia, but Germany sorted that out. Unspecified number of T-72 tanks from Czechoslovakia, 40 BMP-1A1 infantry fighting vehicles, 30 BVP-1 IFVs from Slovakia, 40 Marder-1A3s infantry fighting vehicles, 54 M113s APCs, 50 Dingo MRAPs, 500 Stinger manpads, 2,700 Strela 2 manpads, 900 Panzerfaust anti-tank RPGs, 7,944 RGW-90 Matador anti-tank RPGs, 15,000 anti-tank mines, and then big ones like this, 14 Panzerhaubitze 2000 self-propelled howitzers, 2 Susanna self-propelled howitzers. Those are huge. 20 70mm laser-guided truck-mounted rocket launchers, blah, 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 blah. 46 Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, 2 Iris-T medium-range surface-to-air missile systems, and 1 Patriot battery. Various anti-drone systems, radars, drones, 54 vector drones, 900 land vehicles, including military trucks, armoured SUVs and all-terrain vehicles, 12 Oshkosh tank transporters, 68 or more engineering vehicles, including 15 Bergerpanzer IIs, armoured recovery vehicles, super useful. I mean, this is just insanely good. When you see the list like this, you're like, screw me. Like, Germany have done a damn good job. And this is where it goes to, like, this is not a zero-sum game. Like, me saying well done to Germany is not slagging off the UK. What I am saying is that the UK is perhaps in trouble a little bit itself with finances, with funding its own armed services. And we prefer to go around the world paying for other people to get stuff to Ukraine. It'd be really good to see the UK's list of stuff, actually, because there's probably a lot more on there than you would otherwise think, you know, because you think of challenges, you think of our own stuff, but actually what have we paid for in the same way that Germany here is paying for a lot of Leopard tanks that haven't come from Germany, Leopard 1 tanks, paid for the Slovenian M55s, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff that ends up being in Ukraine from elsewhere that you wouldn't think was Germany, but actually Germany is behind that in the same way that the Netherlands are behind an awful lot of stuff as well. So anyway, awesome Germany, but Taurus is a bit of a problem. Need to get that out of the way. Okay, Slovakian government did not approve the 14th package of military aid for Ukraine worth 40.3 million euros prepared by the former MOD. Now, this is something we knew would happen. What happened was they had pledged they had this package that was in the pipeline before the elections, and then the then Prime Minister said that they weren't going to give it yet, and they were going to wait until the elections were over because they didn't want to compromise the new government coming in, so on and so forth. And it was always going to happen that the new government came in and said, yeah, that ain't happening, because they very formally said it in their campaign trail. Robert Fitzo's party said, we ain't giving any military aid, and so it is. It included, you know, a bunch of stuff, rockets for the Kub air defense system, mortars, mines, ammo. I mean, it's a real shame, but it's not happening. And now, moving on to some Russian things here. Russian battalion consisting of Ukrainian prisoners of war will soon deploy in Ukraine. I had reported on this. So ZMI reported that on November the 7th, the Bogdan Khmelnytsky battalion took an oath of allegiance to Russia and will soon be deployed to Ukraine. 70 Ukrainian prisoners of war. Are you serious? I wonder what's going through their heads, whether they are coerced, whether they voluntarily are doing this. Have they been brainwashed? Are these people who are fighting for the Ukrainians but were maybe a little bit sitting on the edge, maybe from the Donbass region? I don't know. I'd be really interested to see what's going on there. They all look pretty healthy, I have to say. Right. North Korean arms transfers to Russia have estimated being over 500,000 artillery rounds in 2 months, according to one OSINT group. So this is different. We had heard, was it 2 million rounds? Or 1 million rounds, I think it was, that was enough for 2 months. I think that was it. So 500,000 is still a lot, but actually that's half of what was estimated in another analysis. I don't know what's correct. And also this is what has been provided and doesn't talk to what will continue to be provided, if anything. So there are lots of questions still to be had about that, but it might be that is less than was originally thought, or it might be that, yeah, it's still a massive amount and a big worry. Right, due to lack of components, Russia is trying to get back the helicopter engines it previously sold to Belarus, Egypt, Pakistan, and Brazil. This did around yesterday's Wall Street Journal piece that just suggests that Russia really are in a bit of a pickle with regard to components. Sanctions are biting, and particularly the airline industry, but also the aircraft in terms of helicopters and fixed-wing Russian Air Force craft affected in their maintenance by those continuing sanctions. Okay, so it turns out, having recorded the whole of this video, it went on for 50 minutes and I've split it into two. There's so much geopolitical stuff I had to talk about that that'll be in the next video. But this is the military aid segment. Thank you for watching.